we're doing a debate today.
It'll likely become a debate. Millennials blame boomers for the way the world is today. And I think, is that really the case? And did boomers create the world that we're in? There are boomers that are in trouble, but millennials and younger are in even more trouble. Student debt's at an all-time high, stagnating wages, housing market that's just seems like buying homes is so out of reach for millennials.
Everybody needs to like smile and graduate and go to college and get some fancy degree. Like that is dead.
That's a pretty hot take.
Yes, but what up, everybody? Welcome to Legit AF. We're the husband and wife team that talk about real issues in a no BS way, navigating the personal and the professional and how to build a successful life and career in the modern world. You can get our podcast with new episodes every Tuesday morning across YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher. Is that still one of them?
I don't think so. No, I don't know. Maybe.
They just like say something from like 2009.
Friendster, MySpace.
Yeah, I don't know. Please just get the podcast wherever you can get it. Okay. I'm Jenny. I am alongside the only dude who has ever held my hair when I was sick. Pav.
It's kind of a gross intro.
What do you mean? No, it's like a sweet, like,
Is
like
it?
women love. Yeah. Like a guy that like holds
gross.
your, no. Like it's a cute thing, you know?
Is it?
Are you saying I'm gross?
Okay. I mean, hey, I guess I hold your hair when you're sick. I don't know.
It's like super endearing.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. I'm glad that I can be that guy.
Yeah, exactly. You are that guy. Everyone needs one of those guys.
I have short hair, so that's never really been a concern.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so Pav.
Yeah.
Tell me who your childhood hero was.
Oh boy. Do you want like a real hero or a fictional hero?
Who's your hero?
My fictional hero. Oh boy, I'm gonna get made fun of for this one. Look, I grew up playing Halo. Master Chief.
Oh God, this is so embarrassing. I regret this. Oh honey, don't say it out loud.
Master Chief is a great hero. Okay, he fights for humanity. He always does what's asked of him. He cared about Cortana. He took care of her.
So embarrassing.
Master Chief was really cool. And I always thought Master Chief was a cool hero.
And how was I wife of the year?
Well, one of the Halloweens we built, so it took us a while. We made an entire Master Chief outfit, including the helmet. I had these boots on. Well, I did the painting. I painted it. But we cut up all these little like foam pieces and made the costume. And then you dressed up like Cortana. You painted yourself completely blue. You got blue hair, and we had to draw all those like digital lines on you and stuff like that. And it looked really, really cool. And maybe we'll post a photo. Maybe we can share that photo. That's
your incentive to go check out our YouTube.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I was really proud of that. I thought that was a really cool Halloween outfit.
Yeah. The trick was I used those foam squares that you use for kids' playrooms.
Yeah, and then I remember if you like heat them up, they get a little bit more flexible, and then we super glued everything together. I wore your old platform goth boots.
Yeah, it's like the running joke. He's obsessed with my goth days.
And it made me like 6.5 feet tall. So I was able to actually look like Master Chief. And then we got the helmet 3D printed, which I thought was really cool.
God, this is so embarrassing.
Is it?
I think so.
I think it makes me really cool.
Okay, I'm sure you think that.
I think that the guys out there that are listening are going to say, yeah, Master Chief, I can relate to that. I remember playing Halo 2 with my friends.
My hero.
Sure.
Do you want to guess who my hero?
It's going to be a way better, more thoughtful answer.
My hero was Sarah Connor.
I feel like they're the same.
Damn, it's the best. How good of an answer is that?
It's a good answer.
You can't beat that answer.
Sarah Connor's fantastic. I think
Sarah Connor from the Terminator series, for those that haven't seen it, she is the heroine of the series. And shout out to our boy Jim Cameron, who always made sure when nobody else was doing female heroes, he always made sure to do that, right? He had Ripley in Aliens, Sarah Connor.
Can I give you my controversial?
I'm out, Kate Winslet in Titanic.
Well, I mean, she wasn't like an action hero.
I'm just joking. I don't think.
But here's my controversial take, okay? Ooh. And I think this might ruffle some feathers. The best female action hero character is not Sarah Connor.
Oh, God.
It's Furiosa from Fury Road.
Okay. Furiosa's pretty sick. She is not Sarah Connor.
She's better than Sarah Connor.
No, I'm sorry. She needs more time. She needs more canon. Furiosa is from Mad Max, the new Mad Max. So a whole bunch of people.
Theron. She shaved her head.
Yeah, but it's the girl from Queen's Gambit in the new one.
Anya Taylor-Joy, I think is her name.
Fun fact for y'all. So we'll get off of this topic and get to the real topic in a second, which is even spicier. But so Anya Taylor-Joy and the girl who played the younger version of her in Furiosa, they used a cutting edge new AI face technology in the film. So they actually, while Anya Taylor-Joy was on the screen, they were slowly taking her out of the younger girl's face into her real face using some early AI in Hollywood.
I thought that movie was incredible.
Like if you're like,
it's incredible.
If you're looking at the scenes and you're just saying like, wow, like I can't tell where the young girl and the older actress swapped, it's because they actually melded their faces together.
That's super cool.
It's actually pretty cool.
It just makes it more authentic and more realistic, especially that second movie, which we won't spoil, but it's really just like the life of Furiosa, which is such an incredible way to tell the story. Better 100%. Than Sarah Connor. I'm just saying, but one quick point before we move on.
Oh God. What the podcast's about. Come on.
Master Chief and Sarah Connor are very similar.
Okay. That's enough on this topic.
I stand by that.
I'm cutting him off. We're going to talk about
I want to hear about from my Master Chief stands.
Okay. Well, please in the comments leave how Jenny is correct about everything. Thank you. So, okay. Speaking of debates, apparently we kicked it early. We're doing a debate today.
Well, I mean, it'll likely become a debate because I suspect that we've got some differing opinions on this topic. So, it's going to get a little spicy. We're going to talk about, do our boomer parents have it better than us, or did they have it better than us? So we're basically doing boomers versus millennials today.
God. I mean, I think that there's a lot to dive into here. It's not as clear cut as people think. And this isn't, I don't know, we're kind of done with hearing about millennial snowflakes and we're not hearing okay boomer anymore. I feel like both generations are now adults.
Yeah.
I mean, millennials are in their 40s, many of them.
Right.
So it's not really like a get off my lawn kids kind of thing anymore. I feel like it's actually an interesting time to have this conversation because they're both adult groups with distinctive attitudes and norms and they've both had enough time in society to truly like show what their generation stands for.
Well, I think part of what the issue is going to be with this conversation, and just anytime this conversation comes up more broadly, is millennials blame boomers for the way the world is today. And I think part of what we'll get into is that really the case? And, did boomers create the world that we're in, or are they just also living inside of a broader system that's not working for anybody? So I'm sure we'll touch on that. So, okay, let's kick it off by looking at the big picture. So super high level, baby boomers grew up post World War II. The economy was booming after the war. There was tons of jobs.
That's why they're called boomers.
Middle class was thriving. Buying a home was a more realistic goal. Meanwhile, millennials got hit with student debt. So student debt's at an all-time high. Stagnating wages. That's something that we're talk a lot about, and a housing market that's just, it just seems like buying homes is so out of reach for millennials. So that's kind of where we're kicking it off. I'm curious to kind of hear your thoughts on what you think about the housing thing. Specifically, real quick, median home price in 1970, $23,600. Adjusted for inflation, that's $167,000 in today's dollars. Median home price in 2023 is actually $416,000, a little bit higher probably still today. What are your thoughts on that?
It's pretty wild to see how fast home values really, really increase, because that increase has not been steady over time. It's been fairly significant in the last decade or so.
It's not keeping up with wage growth.
No, but I just want to be clear. It has not been an iterative climb to 416K.
Right.
It has been an iterative climb that was accelerated pretty substantially, I'd say in the last 10-ish years or so, certainly after the housing collapse. Like, just to give you context, my sister is an elder millennial. We're on different ends of the spectrum in terms of our age. We're about a decade apart. And her financial experience as a millennial has been very, very different than ours because she got into her home before they really, really took off. So I think when we say millennial, the housing market has applied differently to different aspects of the millennial generation since it's a 15-year window.
I mean, I think the bottom line with housing is the earlier you buy a house, the better. And boomers were just able to front run the housing market, obviously, because they're older, well in advance of Gen X, millennials, etc. So boomers own all the real estate. So of course they're going to benefit more from having access to those assets earlier at a cheaper price. Now that the best real estate's all scooped up, what's left is just too expensive because there's not much of it, and people can't afford it because the prices are too high.
Counterpoint, our parents' generation often saw double point mortgage interest rates, 15%. I think my parents said they saw on one of their mortgages back in the mid to late 80s. And we got 3 and some change on ours. So we did, for a brief window of time during the pandemic, have an incredible home buying opportunity. If you were able to jump during the pandemic, this could have been theoretically an even better opportunity in that small window for housing for certain millennials.
It's just not true, because 15% on a $24,000 property is still way better than 5% on a $500,000 property. The interest rates, people like to point to the fact that interest rates were higher back then, but the home values, the home prices were so much lower. Those are negligible numbers.
Well, it's incongruently applied. It depends on which housing market you're talking about, right? So where my family's from in the greater Toronto area, you've seen 10x from when I was born.
Sure.
Right? But you have not seen that where you were born or where you grew up in Florida. You've seen in 10 years, we've seen like a 3x, on one of our Florida properties, whereas that same time period could show a 10x or at least certainly a 5 to 6x in parts of Canada.
But if you take the average home price in that time, and these are median home prices, so not average, but if you take the median home prices at that time and the median home prices today, and you line those up with the average interest rates at those times, even though the interest rates were much higher, it doesn't meaningfully make a home more expensive. Interest rates are lower today, but it's way more expensive.
I understand, but I do think that overall, it's very clear that the housing market benefited the boomers much more. They also didn't have to compete with globalization in international markets. Certainly where I'm from in Canada, international buyers in the last few decades have significantly increased compared to when I was a child. And so yes, they obviously beat us on housing, but I do think that there have been occasional pockets of opportunity for millennials.
Sure, in up and coming markets or places where, homes haven't already been brought up, or maybe where they're building a lot of new homes. But I think by and large, baby boomers have in some cases scooped up multiple properties.
Yeah, for sure. But, are we going to talk about housing all day long? Right. I get it. Right. Housing is the thing that most of us millennials are getting screwed on, and certainly, Gen Z and below, but it is what it is. We know, unfortunately, we also have a transition coming, a wealth transition. The greatest wealth transfer in the history of the United States is about to come with the airing down of those properties. Right.
But there's still not enough of them. So hang on. I really want to drive this point home.
Okay.
Here's the thing. It's not just that boomers were able to front run the market and buy a lot of the properties. It's also the whole NIMBYism thing. We see that in California. I'm sure it's the case everywhere. It's also laws and regulations that keep those home prices up by preventing the building of new properties. That's another way that we get screwed as millennials.
Yeah, housing policy is bad in a lot of places. I spent 5 years fighting bad San Francisco housing policy.
Who sets those policies?
We are literally in a state right now in California where almost 80% of the entire state is zoned 4 stories or less. 70% of all of the city of San Francisco is zoned 4 stories or less. So yeah, obviously low density housing is a problem that we have, but I think ultimately the zoning problem is a lot more complex than just boomers v millennials.
Sure. But I would argue that boomers created a lot of those policies.
Sure.
Agree to disagree. Moving on to societal stuff. So I think, this is a category that I would argue that it's obvious that the millennials have it better. So you think about like boomers having access to things like pensions, unions, stable careers. Millennials do a lot of gig work, side hustles, and we have little job security. But boomers had things like multiple wars. The civil rights landscape was much different back then. So depending on who you were, what your background is, not all boomers had it the same, right? And it was just a much more closed off society. So more sexism, more bigotry, more racism. I think a lot of those things, even though they are rightfully hot issues today, are not as bad as they were when boomers were growing up. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't even want to say growing up. I think that the conversation around boomers had it better, the hearkening back to a different era, and it was so much easier for us. It's a false conversation to have because ultimately first and foremost, we live in a 24-hour news cycle and we live in a world of social media. So everything bad that happens in the entire world is amplified across millions and millions of devices instantly. Okay. Yeah. So I think that there is this perception that the world today is worse, but the reality is like, certainly from like homicide and, violent crime perspective, some of the stuff that people touch on the most, we're in a safer place now. Think about I always think about the Michael Jackson video. Is it Bad? What's the one where he's dancing in New York with the gangs? You know what I'm talking about?
Beat It?
Is it Beat It? Is that one?
Yeah.
I thought it was the later album. Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Yeah. So I always think about that. Like you think about the 80s and what Times Square looked like compared to what it is today. And just like seriously, I know it sounds silly, but like think about Adventures in Babysitting, that movie in the late 80s that was super popular with Elizabeth Shue.
I don't know what that is.
My God, you're such an immigrant sometimes. You're literally.
I will take that as a compliment. Thank you very much.
Yes, but I just think we forget as millennials that the world is actually looking much better. Like you go get a photo with Elmo at Times Square today compared to what it looked like in 1985, for instance. Okay, here I'm going to give you another one.
Sure.
Completely random.
Great.
What year could women get a loan to start a small business?
I don't know the exact year, but it was sometime in the 80s.
In the 80s. It was 1988.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're picturing this idealism that these people went through and had to grow up in, but what was society actually like for them coming up?
Let me push back on that. And those things are all granted and true, but I would argue that the metric for how good a generation had it wasn't objectively looking at like numbers like that side by side, but the trajectory that the society was going in. I would argue that in baby boomers' time, when they were growing up, the trajectory of society was on the up and up and improving. And I would argue that today, the trajectory of society is actually declining. And I think that's the metric that matters. Yes, we have it better for now, but things are getting worse. And we're measuring that and we're seeing that things are getting worse. Life expectancy is getting worse. Income inequality is getting worse. Incarceration rates are getting worse. All of these things are getting worse. And even though they're still better than where they were, in some cases, we're trending in the wrong direction. And that's the metric that matters.
I think that is an extremely Western viewpoint. I think that if you look at that same time period where we're trending negatively here, you're also overlooking the vast amount of abject poverty that people have been lifted out of in these last few decades. You're overlooking the entire revolution of what's happened in Asia and the tiger economies that have grown over there. I mean, people, when boomers were young, China was rice fields and now it's skyscrapers and one of the biggest economies in the entire world. So I think that is a very specific viewpoint to North America when you say that.
Well, I think we have to get our words straight then. Boomers typically refers to post-World War II population explosion, which granted isn't only America. A lot of Western countries saw a baby boom after the Second World War. But yeah, I mean, look, like on a global scale, sure, things are still trending upward. There's a lot of improvement that we're seeing, people being pulled out of poverty in the last 2 decades in record numbers. But I think if you're looking at the Western world or, the developed world, things are not trending in the right direction. For people like you and I, for millennials in the developed world, things are getting worse.
Yes, but I also wonder, we're in this really weird position in time where you have this generation. So let's put the stakes for a second. The boomers have the majority of the assets right now, and they primarily had millennial children. So there will be a great wealth transfer that happens. But we're all kind of in this weird holding pattern where you both have people now living longer.
Right.
And you also have it amplified by their children are less likely to have the real assets that they had at the time. So it almost amplifies the inequity between the two, because I don't want to say people say like, nobody's waiting for anybody to die. But the reality is a lot of millennials don't feel like they're going to own a home until their parents pass away, which is a really sad state of affairs.
But I think that's just going to I think that point that you just made illustrates what I'm saying and reinforces my point. Sure, those assets are going to get passed down, but they're not going to solve the problem of not enough housing or not enough wealth for people that don't have it today. It's just going to kick that can down further for the next generation. So 20 years from now, we'll be arguing that millennials have all the wealth and they've hoarded everything and blah, blah, blah. And Gen Alpha and Gen Beta, they get nothing, right? So it's just an exacerbation of that same problem. Things are still getting worse. It's not like boomers passing their wealth on to their children, whether they're millennials, Gen X, or Gen Z, maybe. But like, it's just a continuation of the same problem. And I don't think it ultimately solves anything. I think the trend is really the thing that's most important for us to be thinking about.
I think that a lot of boomers, and obviously there's boomers that are listening and our parents are boomers. I think that they had to deal with a world that had very firm boundaries within it and what was allowed and expected of them in society, particularly women.
Yeah.
And I think that the freedom to choose your life is really a modern advent of millennial generations. And I think that, yes, we have more challenges economically speaking when it comes to the millennial generation and, financial prosperity and asset accumulation and things like that. But we also are living in a world that I would argue feels much more vast. It feels like we have the ability to live a life that better aligns with what we want to do. And a lot of boomers I've talked to felt like they had no choice. They had to work at their job for, 20 plus years. My mom worked for 32 years as a cashier for the government liquor store. And the last 5 years of that, we watched her falling apart, but she needed that little pension and she was trapped. And it felt like she was literally exchanging time for that pension. And it was sad. I mean, she was. Do you remember what they gave her when she retired? Do you know what they gave her?
Some trinket.
They gave her a watch.
Yeah.
Gave her a watch and forgot she ever existed.
Yeah. And, I think this is where boomers are also getting screwed, because there are tons of baby boomers out there. The numbers are staggering, that are also never going to be able to retire. Right?
Yeah.
And that's just, again, that's why I think ultimately this isn't, my beef is not with baby boomers. I think the system itself needs to be overhauled in a significant way, because even those boomers that were relying on their pensions or on their 401ks or their homes, maybe they lost their home in 2008, these people are also in a lot of trouble and they might never be able to retire.
How many months away were you guys?
I mean, we were right on the cusp. My parents almost lost their home.
Your mom stopped paying the mortgage for how many months in 2008?
I'm not sure exactly, but
6 months
I know
or something?
it was dicey there for a while.
Yeah, your mom told me. You guys were...
And that's just one out of a million stories, right? There's tons of examples like that for people. But again, the bottom line is there are boomers that are in trouble, but millennials and younger are in even more trouble.
Yeah,
That's the problem.
I think that we need to redefine your pathway to wealth and security for the new generation. And we need to get rid of, if there's one final point I can say, everybody needs to smile and graduate and go to college and get some fancy degree. That is dead. That is dead. And
that's a pretty hot take.
That needs to never come back. I think that we have sold people down a raw deal. I have a lot of millennial friends. The majority of my friends that are more educated than me are financially worse off than I am.
Because of the student debt.
not only because of the student debt, but because there's lost opportunity cost of staying in school and your master's degree. That's time you could be out in the market. That's time that you could be building your resume. That's time you could be saving your money. And if you were a woman in particular that went through that, that was also time on your biological clock if that's something that you so choose. So yeah, I do think that there are ways that millennials kind of got screwed too, because we are the generation that was told we all had to go to college.
I think we could certainly at another time dive into college. Is it worth doing? Is it worth going? Because I know a lot of people have very strong opinions on this topic.
Yeah. Also coding school. That was kind of the alternative that for a lot of millennials as well, they were told just learn to code, don't go to school. Now that's going to the wayside too.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. You want to move on? Yeah.
I mean, this is a topic we could talk about for literally hours, but.
And just to be clear, like I've got nothing against baby boomers. I just feel like, I wanted to try and represent the millennial perspective that we are getting a bit of a raw deal economically. And that's not necessarily the boomers' fault, but it is the reality. The numbers are the numbers.
I think that we are all adults now. And I think the conversation of what our generations can do better for the next generation is a valid one. And we need to all be having it, not throwing, we shouldn't be throwing stuff at each other and making this millennial v boomers. This is about how we collectively together make it better for alpha and beta and the next generation, because they're going to have it the toughest yet.
Yep. I think we've got time for one legit or lame AF. Do you want to drive this one?
All right. So legit AF or lame AF, wellness bloggers.
I honestly don't really have a strong opinion on this because I don't really follow too many wellness bloggers. I guess if I had to try and give a balanced take, there's probably a lot of garbage out there that just is wrong.
Yeah, but you say you don't follow wellness bloggers, but one could argue I don't think you watch or you don't listen to Huberman, but one could argue that a lot of the bro science is like a male version of wellness bloggers.
Yeah, but I don't really listen to too much of that stuff. I think you just have to be careful because you can literally find anything you want to reinforce the thing that you're trying to do on the internet.
That is the problem, I think. A lot of people could argue wellness bloggers potentially carried the election. Like it's not a small cohort of people. I don't know how I feel because you really need to take your personal accountability for your health and take it into your own hands and get it out of the system. But also it's gone really far.
I'm going to go with lame, not because I have a problem with any particular or group of wellness bloggers. It's just not really my cup of tea. It's not something that I'm interested in.
It's not your cup of detox tea?
It's not my cup of detox tea. I don't, put cumin in it or whatever. So
says cold plunger over here.
Yeah.
I'm going to go probably lame AF too. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a hot topic. I'm sure many of you have comments across all generations, how you're all feeling. In particular, I'm curious how some of the Gen Zers are feeling in this conversation too, because you're inheriting this right after us. So if you got any comments or topics you want to see us cover, you can follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook with Legit AF Pod, or drop us a line on our site, legitafpod.com. As always, you can catch our podcast every Tuesday morning across all platforms, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Please review us, leave comments, share this, help us get the word out there so that we can quit our jobs forever and just be professional podcasters.
I'm having fun doing it.
It's pretty cool. Can't wait to see y'all next week.
Bye, Boomer.
Bye. Bye. Okay, Boomer.